Did you hear the parallel in our gospel passage today? It's the story of two beloved sons. One who is transfigured in glory on the top of a mountaintop. Another who is convulsing and suffering in the dust of the valley below. Both fathers speak words of love to their sons. One apparently out of exceeding joy. Another out of fear and desperation. I'm wondering if these stories taken together speak about the reality of human life and the presence of God in both moments. Today is the apex of the liturgical season that we name as Epiphany. It's Transfiguration Sunday today, the last Sunday of the Epiphany season. And as we heard in our opening hymn, we have had weeks of hints and intimations: a star, a dove, an abundance of wine, a wedding feast. But today, we stand in full sunlight, basking in the beloved's glory. Today, we hear the very voice of God. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all tell the story of the Transfiguration, which underscores its importance in the early church. And all three of their accounts end with this narrative of the demon-possessed boy whom the disciples cannot heal. It's an odd pairing, to say the least, and it's always intrigued me. This singular event, the Transfiguration, in Jesus' life has accumulated many layers of theological meaning. And it reveals some very important things. For example, it reveals Christ's divine nature. It confirms his sonship. It foreshadows his death. It secures his place in the stream of Israel's history, and it exalts him above the law, Moses, and above the prophets, Elijah, as it prefigures the resurrection that we know is to come. And this is all very good, but it leaves me kind of cold. I find it interesting, but these thoughts don't change my heart and make me more loving. I am more interested in the boy who was suffering from seizures in the valley. Jesus did come down the mountain, and he reluctantly healed the boy. And this is what I'd like to know. How does the glory on the mountaintop speak to the agony in the valley? What does it mean that these two experiences, fullness and emptiness, ecstasy and despair, light and shadow, how is it that these different things share a landscape in this famous gospel narrative? And as I said earlier, the way I see it, there are two beloved sons in this story. What happened in the valley when Jesus was being transfigured up on the mountain? Well, what we know from the story is that Jesus invited only 3 of his disciples. The remaining 9 spent the night, it seems, in anxious futility, trying to do their master's work as the stakes rose higher and higher. at least the way I imagine it, the scene in the valley became tense and ugly as a much longed for healing didn't happen. We know that a father and a son suffered. Even as the heavens broke open nearby on the mountaintop. Some people who really needed Jesus that night experienced the ache of his absence, even as a select few basked in glory. Now, when I read the Bible and I interpret a passage, I tend to see how it applies to me as an individual. My mountaintop experience, my valley, my relationship with God. But this is very misguided and dangerous. Don't do what I do. Because as I thought about it, I realized that the truth is that my mountain lies right next to your valley. The truth is that your pain does not cancel out my joy. The truth is that it is entirely possible for you to sit in church on Sunday morning just basking in the sweet presence of God's Spirit, being raised to new spiritual heights. While one pew over, I am crying my eyes out because I'm feeling the ache of God's absence, and that is unbearable. I think the same applies if we widen the lens. We in the privileged West, especially here in the United States, don't we occupy so many mountaintops while our siblings throughout the world dwell in valleys of hunger or warfare or violence and abuse? Do we not at the same time experience valleys that are peculiar to 21st century life? Things like isolation and loneliness, anxiety and depression, unbelievable work stress and frenzy. Don't we experience all of that? While many who have so much less than we do in terms of material comfort, while they enjoy the mountaintops of more nourishing cultural traditions and strong communities. To say that this is unfair is completely beside the point. It is the world that we live in right now. And so here is the great challenge to the Christian life and the great challenge to the church, Christ's body. Can we speak glory to agony? And can agony speak to glory? Can we hold the mountain and the valley in faithful tension with each other, denying neither while embracing them both? Can we do this hard work out of pure love for each other, so that no one among us, not the joyous one, not the anguished one, not the beloved one, not the broken one, can we truly do this hard work to listen so that no one is ever truly alone? Yes, Jesus did eventually come down from that mountain. And yes, he healed the desperately sick boy. But let's not forget the suffering that came first. Let's not flatten the story to give our religion neat lines and soft edges. The suffering was real, and it deserves honest witness. After all, the cry of that human father, "Teacher, I beg you, look at my son. He is my only child." This is a desperate plea and an act of faith. He pushed his way through the crowd and he shouted to Jesus because he had the hope and the belief that Jesus could make a difference. He didn't find this act of faith up on a mountaintop. No, his faith was forged in the valley of his son's pain and his own as he stood in witness of it. With Transfiguration Sunday, we come to the end of another liturgical season. And having seen the glorious light of Epiphany, we prepare now for the long shadows of Lent. And I don't know what voices will speak to us in the Lenten wilderness. Maybe you'll hear glory. Maybe I'll hear agony. Maybe we'll hear each other. But whatever you hear, don't flinch. Don't flee. Don't assume that one voice must drown out the other. Both voices need to speak. Both voices have much to teach us. So listen. Listen. Both voices are beloved of a Father.